Human remains at farmer's market shock Red Creek. Have you ever imagined a peaceful town slowly turning into a place of suffocating fear? In the foothills of Shadow Mountain, Boone County, West Virginia, there was a small, unincorporated town called Red Creek in 2022. It was like a little haven, hidden away in the dense green of the Appalachians. Cornfields and pastures stretched as far as the eye could see. Cool air flowed from the mountain peaks, and every morning roosters crowed, calling to each other across the holler. Simple living, neighbor helping neighbor, was the pride of the townsfolk who had long been accustomed to a life of hard work and community. From dawn, the gravel road leading to the farmer's market was always busy. Women carried wicker baskets. Men guided old pickup trucks loaded with produce from their gardens. Meanwhile, small children ran barefoot through the grass, laughing. The Red Creek Farmers Market, held in the small clearing by the town hall, was the heart of the community. It was a place where people met, swapped stories, or just asked about each other's families. The air was filled with the loud calls of vendors, mixed with the aroma of fresh vegetables, the scent of apple butter, the sharp smell of smoked trout, and the fresh, metallic scent of newly butchered meat. It all mixed into one, creating a unique atmosphere that made anyone feel at home. Among those familiar faces was a middle-aged woman named Sarah Jenkins. She was past 50. Her body was a bit stooped from a lifetime of hard work, but her spirit was bright. Almost every morning, she came to the market with her woven basket to buy food for her small family. Her husband worked as a hand at the local lumber mill, and her son, Caleb, was still in high school. For Sarah, the market wasn't just a place to shop. It was a place to greet neighbors, to laugh, and to hear news, both happy and sad. To her, interacting with her community made her heart feel lighter. That day, in early July 2022, the Red Creek sky seemed clear. The sun rose slowly from behind Shadow Mountain, casting a warm light on the tin roofs of the small houses. But beneath the peaceful daily routine, there was one thing that always made some residents uneasy. The deep woods at the base of Shadow Mountain had long been considered haunted. There were countless stories passed down from grandparents to grandchildren. Stories of people who went into the woods and vanished without a trace. Rumors of a woman's wailing heard deep in the night. Some believed it, others dismissed it as just tales to scare children. Sarah Jenkins didn't want to think about it. All she had on her mind was the chicken stew she planned to make for supper. Her steps paused at the stall of Mr. Jed Miller, a butcher around 45 years old. He was known for being friendly, often giving discounts to his loyal customers. The price of meat at his stall was usually cheaper than anywhere else, making him the top choice for many housewives. That morning, several people were already in line. From a distance, the cuts of red meat arranged on the large wooden board looked ordinary. But as the sunlight hit the stall table, Sarah felt something was strange. The grain of the meat looked too soft. The fat was a pale, sickly color, and the texture was odd. She leaned in, staring closer. Her brow furrowed, her lips trembled, and then a low whisper escaped her. "Why does this meat look just like human flesh?" For a moment, Sarah froze. The basket nearly slipped from her hand. A young man also waiting in line grew curious. He, too, bent down to look. His face suddenly turned ghost white, and in a trembling voice, he screamed, "Oh my God, that's a human hand." In a matter of seconds, the bustling market turned to chaos. Police secure butcher Silas named. Panic exploded. People shoved each other, trying to get away. Some dropped their groceries, others were trampled in the stampede. The metallic, coppery smell of blood hung heavy in the air, making some people vomit on the spot. Mr. Jed Miller just stood frozen behind his table. His face was pale, sweat pouring down his temples. Whispers spread like wildfire through dry grass. "He's selling human meat." That was the news passed from mouth to mouth. In a short time, nearly the entire town knew. Some were crying hysterically, others ran to lock their doors, and some ran to find their families. The town's usual peace was suddenly shrouded in a terror they had never felt before. Two volunteer firefighters who were usually at the town hall ran toward the commotion. They tried to calm the crowd, but the residents were already enraged. All eyes were fixed on the large wooden table at Mr. Miller's stall. On it lay a severed human hand, the fingernails still intact. The firefighters quickly covered the table with a tarp and pulled Mr. Miller away. But the crowd screamed, "He's a killer. Lynch him right now." Mr. Miller's wife, Marlena, pushed through the crowd, sobbing, "My husband is innocent. He's just a butcher. Please don't hurt him." Her cries only made the scene louder. It wasn't long before the Boone County Sheriff's Department arrived with a small pickup truck and two patrol cruisers. A young officer named Deputy Owen Driscoll immediately took charge. With a loud voice, he gave commands. "Secure the area. All residents move back. This is now an official investigation." Mr. Miller was immediately handcuffed. His face was ashen, his voice trembling. "I don't know anything. I just bought the meat from an acquaintance. I swear to God, I didn't know it was human." But who would believe him? For the townsfolk, the sight on his table was all the proof they needed. Several young men nearly attacked Mr. Miller before the police fired a warning shot into the air. The crowd slowly dispersed, though the terrified whispers continued. By evening, the news had spread throughout Red Creek. Children were forbidden from going outside. Mothers locked their doors tight. The men gathered at the local diner, speaking in low tones about the worst possibilities. "Is this some kind of organ trafficking ring?" asked an old man, taking a drag from his cigarette. "No, this is the work of those haints from Shadow Mountain," another replied. "Ain't people always going missing up there?" The name Shadow Mountain haunted them again. Old stories of lost Civil War soldiers whose ghosts still marched, of spirits of miners who dragged people away. It all resurfaced, adding to the town's fear. The first night after the incident, Red Creek felt different. House lights stayed on late. Doors were double-bolted. From the distance, the sound of dogs barking echoed. It was as if the whole town was holding its breath, waiting for something unseen. Sarah Jenkins admitted she couldn't sleep all night. The image of the human hand at the stall kept haunting her. She looked at her son Caleb, who was sleeping restlessly, and her heart filled with anxiety. Meanwhile, at the sheriff's office, Owen Driscoll sat in the interrogation room, staring at the handcuffed Jed Miller. Owen tried to stay professional, but deep in his heart, there was an unease he couldn't explain. The hand on that table seemed to stare back at him. He knew this case wasn't just a simple butcher's mistake. There was something bigger, darker, hiding in the woods of Shadow Mountain. And that night, Owen promised himself that whatever happened, he had to find the truth. Owen thought of his fiancée, Eliza, who had vanished in those very woods, though it meant walking deeper into the darkness. The morning after the gruesome discovery at the Red Creek Market, the air felt heavy. The sun was just rising, but the air felt bone-chillingly cold. The streets, usually filled with the laughter of children, were now empty. Women swept their porches with grim faces. Men stood on their front steps, their uneasy gazes fixed on Shadow Mountain. In the parking lot of the sheriff's substation, a small truck was already parked. 6 deputies in tactical vests stood ready with headlamps and AK-9 unit. The young deputy Owen Driscoll stood before them, staring at a map of the area with a serious look. Beside him, Sheriff Roy Parsons, who was leading the investigation, gave a short briefing. "We're going in from the South Fork." According to Mr. Miller, he always met the person who gave him the meat on the edge of the woods, near the small creek. "Our focus is to find tracks, evidence, or any sign of suspicious activity. Remember, don't get sloppy." A young deputy raised his hand, his face hesitant. "Sir, the locals say those woods are haunted, that there are spirits. Should we be worried about that kind of thing?" Sheriff Parsons looked at his men. "We're police. Our job is to face men. But I'm not blind. Fear can be more dangerous than a bullet. So stay sharp." The team moved out. The truck stopped at the base of Shadow Mountain. The rest of the journey was on foot. The morning sunlight was filtered by the dense canopy, making the atmosphere dim and damp. The ground was muddy. The sound of twigs snapping under their boots and the smell of damp earth mixed with the cold wind, adding to the chilling feeling. Owen walked point with the K9. Every time the wind blew, the hair on his neck stood on end. He felt as if eyes were watching him from behind the trees. But he tried to push the fear aside by remembering the face of his fiancée, Eliza, who had vanished 2 years ago on a trail near this mountain. In his heart, Owen promised that if there was a connection between Eliza's disappearance and this incident, he would not stop until he found the truth. After nearly a mile, the K9 barked loudly. The team stopped. Owen shined his flashlight on the ground. There was a faint, brownish stain among the dry leaves. He touched it lightly with a gloved finger, then brought it to his nose. The smell was sharp. "This is blood. Mark the location." An officer immediately took notes and a sample. Not far from there, they found ATV tire tracks still clear in the damp earth. The tracks led deeper into the woods. Sheriff Parsons nodded slowly. "Mr. Miller wasn't lying. Someone is coming in and out of these woods, carrying heavy loads." The journey continued, more carefully. The woods grew darker. Even though it was still day, the huge trees stood packed together like a wall. The sounds of forest birds were strange, and occasionally, the snap of a twig came from a distance. The whole team felt like they were being watched. Suddenly, a deputy pointed at the ground. "Sir, look at this." On the grass, there were drag marks, as if something heavy had been pulled. The long line was mixed with dirt and dark stains. Everyone fell silent. Wild imaginations surfaced. Was this the track of a human body being dragged? Owen swallowed, then said calmly, "We follow this track. But stay in formation." They followed the narrow path until they reached an open clearing. There stood a dilapidated hunting cabin made of old planks and rotting leaves. Its roof was almost caved in. Scattered around it were plastic bottles, old sacks, and rusted tools. The K9 sniffed loudly, its fur standing on end. The strange smell grew stronger. Dilapidated cabin found. Victim list includes Eliza's name. All the deputies raised their weapons. Owen called out in a loud voice, "This is the sheriff's department. Is anyone in there?" No answer. Only the sound of wind tearing at the rotten siding. 2 deputies approached and kicked the fragile door. The door swung open. A putrid smell immediately rushed out. Several officers nearly gagged. Inside, the atmosphere was grim. There was a small wooden table with a rusty knife caked with dark stains. In the corner lay several large burlap sacks. One was torn, revealing a piece of a woman's blouse with dried stains. Sheriff Parsons clenched his fist. "My God. This isn't just a hideout. This is a slaughterhouse." Owen moved to another corner. He found a worn-out notebook. Its pages were filled with scrawled handwriting. Some were in strange symbols that were hard to read. But there was also clear writing, a list of names, ages, and dates. 3 of them matched reports of missing persons from the Red Creek area in recent months. One of new names made Owen's heart feel like it had stopped. Eliza. Age 24. Owen's vision swam. His breath caught. The world seemed to collapse around him. Sheriff Parsons looked at him with a sympathetic face. "Owen, we have to stay professional. I know this is hard, but precisely because of this, we have to catch this person." Before they could discuss it further, a faint voice was heard in the distance. "Help! Help me!" Everyone froze. The voice was clearly that of a weak, hoarse woman. Owen signaled. The team moved quickly, following the sound. They pushed through thick bushes until they found a shallow pit covered with branches. Carefully, they removed the branches. Inside, a young woman was bound tightly. Her mouth was gagged with a cloth. Her body was covered in bruises. As soon as she was freed, she fell unconscious into an officer's arms. "It's Annie. 23 years old, from Red Creek. Reported missing last month," one of the officers said in a choked voice. Owen whispered softly. We're on the right track. The person we're looking for is here. They immediately evacuated Annie out of the woods. But before leaving, Owen looked back at the tall, dark trees. A strange feeling enveloped him. He was sure that from behind the darkness, a pair of eyes was watching them, waiting for the right moment to emerge. That night, everyone realized the hunt had only just begun. A survivor found in the woods. The evening after Annie's rescue, the atmosphere in Red Creek grew even more tense. The news about the girl found in such a horrific condition made the residents truly believe that a dark force was hiding in the woods of Shadow Mountain. Children were forbidden from leaving the house. Mothers locked their doors tight. The men gathered at the diner with grim faces. At the sheriff's substation, Jed Miller sat in the interrogation chair, his hands cuffed. His face was pale, sweat dripping from his temples. He had been looking down since morning, only occasionally lifting his face when questioned. Owen Driscoll sat across the table, his gaze sharp. If you're really innocent, tell me who sold you that meat, Owen said in a deep voice. Mr. Miller sobbed. His name is Silas. He comes at night, by the edge of the woods near the creek. He said it was wild boar. I never opened the sacks until I got home. I really didn't know. That name made Owen freeze. His chest tightened, as if an old weight was crushing him again. Silas. 2 years ago, that name had come up right when Eliza disappeared on the trail to Shadow Mountain. Since then, the case of his fiancée's disappearance had never been solved. Sheriff Parsons, standing in the corner of the room, looked at Owen. He knew the history surrounding that name. Parsons stepped forward, patting Owen's shoulder slowly. Owen, stay calm. We have to confirm this first. But Owen couldn't hide the turmoil in his heart. He stared at Mr. Miller more intensely. Are you sure his name is Silas? Mr. Miller nodded quickly. I swear on my life, I'm not lying. That night, an emergency meeting was held. Sheriff Parsons led it with a grim face. Tomorrow morning, we go deeper into Shadow Mountain. We look for tracks and evidence. But remember, those aren't ordinary woods. The locals believe evil spirits live there. We have to be ready for anything. Owen sat silently. His left hand tightly gripped an old photo of Eliza he kept in his wallet. His gaze was distant, as if reliving the last night Eliza disappeared. He still remembered it clearly. She had called to say she was heading home from her sister's house and never arrived. Silas had been rumored to be seen in the area around the same time. Meanwhile, outside the sheriff's office, the town's atmosphere grew more menacing. Residents gathered at the town hall, discussing the news of the hand at the market, the dilapidated cabin in the woods, and the poor girl, Annie, who had been rescued. All the stories mixed together, amplifying the fear. Some were convinced it was the work of a cruel man. But many more believed that Silas was no longer human, but a creature allied with the spirits of the woods. Sarah Jenkins, the first witness at the market, now hardly dared to leave her house. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw the image of the hand with its intact nails. Her son, Caleb, could only sit in the corner of his room, grim-faced. He was ashamed, confused, and terrified. His friends at school would surely avoid him now that his friend's father was accused of being involved in this horrific case. At the mayor's house, Mr. Thompson tried to calm the residents who came demanding answers. His voice was firm but full of doubt. We must leave this to the police. Don't take matters into your own hands. But some residents remained unsettled. They were convinced the police couldn't fight the supernatural force stalking their town. Night fell quickly. The wind from the mountain rustled, carrying strange sounds like faint, unintelligible whispers. The lights in the houses stayed on, doors locked tight. The sound of prayers could be heard from the small church on the corner, echoing through Red Creek. In a small room at the substation, Owen sat lost in thought. His memory returned to the past. He could still feel Eliza's smile, her soft voice, and their promise to build a small house together after he returned from his training. Silas. That name now felt like a dagger twisting in his heart. Owen couldn't stop asking, was it really Silas who took Eliza from me? And if it was, why? Sheriff Parsons entered the room, looking at Owen, who seemed to have lost his spirit. Owen, I know this is hard for you. But remember, we can't get caught in someone else's game. If we let our guard down, this town could fall into chaos. Owen nodded slowly. Though his heart was still restless, he knew that starting tomorrow, every step he took wasn't just about his duty as an officer, but also a personal journey to find the truth about his lost love. And in the dark woods of Shadow Mountain, whether in the dilapidated cabin or on a hidden trail, a pair of eyes was perhaps watching. The figure named Silas was now more than just a suspect. He was a shadow from the past, reopening old wounds. The first night, the town gripped by fear. That night in Red Creek passed slowly, as if time itself was reluctant to move. The house lights shone brightly, but the fear was so thick the light offered no warmth. The chirping of crickets and the rustling wind, usually a comforting rural soundtrack, now sounded menacing. Every snap of a twig made residents jump. At the town hall, people gathered, too afraid to go home. Some brought blankets, others just sat leaning against the walls. Children slept in their mothers' laps, while the men sat restlessly, chain-smoking cigarettes. They talked, they speculated, trying to calm themselves. But in the end, it all came back to one name that now echoed through the town, a name that made their skin crawl: Silas. Some residents swore they had seen a tall, thin figure in a ragged raincoat at the edge of the woods. Some said his eyes glowed red. Others claimed to hear his laughter from a distance. The later it got, the more strange stories circulated, and the more people believed that Silas was no longer human. Meanwhile, at the sheriff's office, Owen Driscoll sat alone in the now empty interrogation room. His left hand gripped the photo of Eliza, his fiancée who had vanished 2 years ago. His gaze was empty, but his eyes were red and watery. The name Silas had reopened an old wound that had never healed. Owen remembered his last day with Eliza. That evening, they sat at the edge of a field, watching the orange sunset. Eliza smiled, saying she couldn't wait to build a small house with Owen after they were married. That smile was still so clear in his memory, the smile that vanished when she disappeared. Since then, Owen had struggled to find her. But all traces stopped at the trail leading into Shadow Mountain. And now, after 2 years, the name Silas had returned. The name Jed Miller spoke. The name written in the worn-out notebook in the cabin, right next to Eliza's name. Sheriff Parsons entered the room, looking at Owen with concern. You can't let your emotions take over. We have to keep thinking clearly. Owen took a long breath. I can't ignore it, sir. Every piece of evidence points back to Silas. And if Eliza is in his hands, I can't just stand by. Parsons clapped him on the shoulder. That's exactly why we have to be careful. We're not just dealing with a criminal, we're dealing with the fear of an entire town. In the residents' homes, the atmosphere was just as tense. Sarah Jenkins sat hugging Caleb, who slept restlessly. Her eyes were weary. Her mind kept going back to that morning at the market when she first saw the human hand. Since then, she felt her life was no longer the same. She often whispered in her prayers, asking for protection, that her son and husband be kept far from harm. At the mayor's house, Mr. Thompson spoke with several community leaders. They discussed what steps to take if this terror continued. Some suggested a massive neighborhood watch. Some wanted to evacuate to the next town. But that difficult decision couldn't be made yet. That night, the sound of barking dogs echoed. Several residents peeked from behind their curtains, hoping it was just a stray animal. But rumors spread quickly. Some said they saw a tall shadow walking at the edge of the town road. Others swore they heard a horse laugh near the cornfields. At the town hall, a young pastor Evans tried to calm the residents. Don't let fear conquer your hearts. Whatever is happening, we must remember that man can only hold power over us if we are weak in our faith. His words were soft, but there was still a tremor of fear on the faces of those listening. Owen, still at the substation, finally stood up. He knew he wouldn't be able to sleep tonight. In his mind, there were only two things. First, his responsibility as an officer to protect the town. Second, the longing for Eliza that burned in his chest. He didn't know if Eliza was still alive or if she had become a victim. But one thing was certain, this all started with Silas, and only by catching him could he find the answers. Sheriff Parsons finally decided to send a small team to stand guard at the edge of the woods that night. Though he didn't expect much, at least the police presence might offer a little peace of mind to the residents. Owen offered to go. Though Parsons hesitated, Owen's determined gaze was undeniable. The night grew late. A thin fog rolled down from the mountain slope, blanketing the town roads. From a distance, the sound of trees creaking in the wind was terrifying. The residents who were still awake could only hug their families, praying for morning. And deep in the dark woods of Shadow Mountain, a thin figure in a ragged raincoat stood still behind the trees. His eyes glinted, staring toward the town. A faint smile crossed his lips. He knew his name was being spoken again. And that meant the game was just beginning. The figure of Silas appears, then vanishes. That morning, Red Creek was blanketed in a thin fog that rolled down from Shadow Mountain. The roads were damp with dew. Water dripped from the leaves, and the air was cold enough to bite. Residents were still afraid to leave their homes. The market, usually bustling, was now quiet. Only a few vendors dared to open their stalls. In the substation parking lot, 6 officers prepared with vests, weapons, and simple gear. Owen Driscoll stood at the front. His eyes stared straight ahead at the menacing mountain. Beside him, Sheriff Roy Parsons gave a brief. "We're going in via the South Fork," the trail Miller mentioned. "Focus on finding evidence, anything that can link us to this, Silas. Don't move alone. Stay in formation." The team set off. The truck stopped at the base of the mountain and they continued on foot. Large trees stood close together, roots snaking over the ground. The sound of forest birds was sharp, and every snap of a twig made everyone turn wide-eyed. The K-9 walked ahead. Owen felt every step was leading him toward something he had been searching for. His mind went back to Eliza. Her smile and her voice seemed to be present in the rustling wind. After almost a mile, the K-9 barked loudly. Owen bent down, shining his light on the ground. There was a faint bloodstain on the dry leaves. He touched it with a glove. The coppery smell hit his nose. "This blood is fresh." Not far from there, they found the ATV tracks again, cutting through the damp earth, leading deeper in. Sheriff Parsons noted it, his eyes hardening. Someone is definitely using this forest. The journey continued, the atmosphere growing darker. Though the sun was high, the trees were a dense wall, blocking the light. The team members began to feel a strange chill, as if they were being watched. Suddenly, a deputy pointed. "Look at this." There were drag marks. A long line mixed with dirt and dark stains. Owen felt his heart pound. In a low voice he said, "We follow this trail." They moved carefully, following the narrow path until they reached a clearing. In the middle stood the dilapidated hunting cabin. Its roof was almost gone, its walls had holes, and it was surrounded by plastic bottles, old sacks, and rusted tools. The K-9 growled, its fur on end. The smell of rot was overwhelming. All the officers raised their weapons. Owen stepped forward, calling out, "This is the sheriff's department. Anyone in there?" No answer. Just the wind whistling through the broken siding. 2 deputies kicked the door in. The smell of decay rushed out, making several men gag. Inside, it was grim. The small wooden table with the rusty, stained knife. The burlap sacks in the corner. One was torn, showing a piece of a woman's blouse. Sheriff Parsons clenched his fist. "My God. This isn't just a hideout. It's a slaughterhouse." Owen searched another corner. His eyes fell on a worn-out notebook, half damp. He carefully opened it. Scrawled handwriting. Some in strange symbols. But there was a list of names, ages, and dates. 3 matched missing persons reports. Then his eyes stopped on one name, Eliza. Age 24. Owen's heart stopped. His breath caught. The world collapsed. The hand holding the book shook violently. Eliza's face flashed in his mind. Her laugh, her gentle smile. Sheriff Parsons saw Owen's pale face. I know this is hard for you. But remember, we can't get lost in this. The fact that her name is here means we have to catch Silas now. Owen gritted his teeth. His voice trembled, but it was full of resolve. I'll find him, sir. Whatever it takes, I will find him. Suddenly, a faint voice was heard from a distance. A woman's weak, hoarse voice, begging for help. All the officers froze. Owen signaled. Follow that voice. They moved quickly, crashing through the underbrush. After a few minutes, they found a shallow pit covered with branches. Carefully, they moved them aside. Inside, a young woman was bound tightly, gagged. Her body was covered in bruises. As soon as she was freed, she collapsed unconscious. A deputy whispered, "It's Annie, the girl from Red Creek who went missing last month." Owen looked at the girl's pale face. He whispered, "We're on the right track. Silas is here." They immediately evacuated Annie. But before leaving, Owen looked back at the dark, towering trees. He was sure, from behind the darkness, a pair of eyes was watching. And right then, Owen knew the hunt had only just begun. Trap is set, Eliza's locket found. Sunset descended slowly on Red Creek. The sun hid behind Shadow Mountain, leaving an orange sky that quickly turned dark. The town felt gloomier than usual. People gathered at the town hall. Their faces were anxious, their voices hushed. Fear had crept into every corner. They heard the news. The police had found a young woman in the woods, tied up and covered in wounds. The news spread like wildfire, making the residents even more certain that a dark force was hiding in those trees. In the town hall, the girl lay weakly on a cot. Her name was Annie. She was 23. Her parents, who had nearly lost all hope, were now crying tears of joy, holding her hand. Annie's body was covered in bruises, her lips cracked, her eyes dull. She couldn't say much, only nodding occasionally when asked. Owen Driscoll stood in the corner of the room, watching Annie with a determined gaze. A belief was growing in his heart. If Annie could be found, then Eliza might still be out there. He believed his fiancée wasn't completely gone. Sheriff Parsons sat next to the mayor, Mr. Thompson. His voice was firm but weary. This discovery proves we're dealing with something more than just a common criminal. Silas isn't just selling illegal meat. He's a kidnapper and possibly a serial killer. Mr. Thompson sighed heavily. The town is terrified. They're starting to lose faith in their own safety. We have to act fast. If not, this town will be empty. Outside the town hall, residents huddled. Some were grateful Annie was found. Others were even more panicked. An old man spoke softly, staring at the woods. I'm telling you, he ain't human. He can go into the woods and just disappear. No normal person can do that. Those words spread, adding to the tension. Some women whispered that Annie's cries for help sounded like a ghost's wail. Night fell. The lights of the town hall shone brightly. Several men stood guard outside. Owen sat not far from where Annie was resting. He watched her every move. The girl would wake up occasionally, her eyes filling with tears. Her lips trembled as if she wanted to speak but couldn't. Finally, near midnight, Annie spoke. Her voice was hoarse, almost a whisper. I saw him. Owen moved closer, kneeling. Who did you see? Annie swallowed hard. A tall, thin figure, wearing a ragged raincoat. His eyes, they were red. His laugh was terrifying. He called himself Silas. The room went silent. Everyone who heard it felt a chill. That name echoed again, more real this time. Sheriff Parsons took a long breath. It's clear. He's really out there. Annie sobbed again. I heard another voice. Someone was with him. A cold voice. But I never saw their face. Owen felt his heart pound. Another voice. Silas wasn't alone. Annie was exhausted. She closed her eyes again. Her mother covered her with a thin blanket while the police tightened the guard around the town hall. Outside, the night air felt colder. The wind from the mountain carried a faint sound, like laughter echoing among the trees. The men on watch looked at each other, their faces pale. Owen stepped outside, staring into the dark woods. He felt a gaze from the distance, as if eyes were following his every move. His left hand gripped the photo of Eliza. He whispered, "Eliza, just wait for me." Sheriff Parsons joined him. "Owen, we need a solid plan. I know your heart is tied to this case. But don't let emotion blind you." Owen turned, his eyes sharp. "It's because of Eliza that I won't back down. If Silas is out there, I will find him." That night, the residents of Red Creek barely slept. The discovery of Annie wasn't the end of the terror, it was a sign that the game had just begun. And in the woods of Shadow Mountain, behind the thick fog, the thin figure in the ragged raincoat stood still. His laugh was low, his eyes glowing. He knew his name had been spoken. He knew his opponent was waiting. But that's exactly what he wanted. Rash youths, village, and chaos. The days following Annie's discovery brought no peace to Red Creek. Instead, fear dug in deeper. The farmer's market was empty, the fields were untended, and children were not allowed outside. It was as if the town, usually full of laughter, had become a silent village, waiting for something to explode. Every night, the residents chose to gather at the town hall, sleeping crowded on the floor. Pastor Evans led prayers almost every night, his voice trembling as he read holy verses that echoed amidst the cries of children and the sobs of parents. But prayer didn't completely erase the fear. Outside, dogs barked incessantly. Sometimes, a faint knock would be heard on an empty house's door. Some residents claimed to see a tall shadow standing at the end of the road, only to vanish. At Sarah Jenkins' house, the fear was palpable. She often woke in the middle of the night, hearing footsteps circling her home. Her son, Caleb, even swore he saw a tall figure in a ragged raincoat standing at the end of the street, just staring at their house. When Caleb screamed, the figure vanished like smoke. News like this spread fast. The town was becoming convinced that Silas wasn't just a man. Some believed he was a creature allied with the spirits of the woods, perhaps having sold his soul. At the sheriff's substation, the tension was just as high. Some of the younger deputies were starting to crack. One asked for a transfer. Another admitted to having nightmares every night, seeing Silas standing at the foot of his bed. Sheriff Parsons tried to rally them. "We're officers. Our job is to protect these people. Whatever happens, we do not back down." His voice was firm, but his own face looked exhausted. Owen Driscoll sat silently in the corner. His eyes were red from lack of sleep. Every time he closed them, he saw Eliza's face. Sometimes he thought he heard her voice in the distance, calling his name softly. He didn't know if it was real or just a game. But one thing was certain, he believed Eliza was still alive. One night, Owen went on patrol alone to the edge of the woods. The cold wind blew hard. He stepped slowly, guided only by a small flashlight. Suddenly, he heard a faint voice. A woman's whisper, calling his name. "Owen." His body went rigid. It was a voice he knew so well. It was Eliza's voice. Owen held his breath, his eyes darting. "Eliza? Are you there?" The voice came again, this time deeper in the woods. Owen stepped forward, his heart pounding. But when he reached a small, dark clearing, the voice was gone. There were only the shadows of the trees. And that's when, from the darkness, the tall, thin figure in the ragged raincoat emerged. His eyes glinted red. His hoarse laugh cut through the air. He pointed at Owen with a slow, mocking gesture. Owen raised his weapon, his hand shaking. "Where's Eliza? Tell me." The figure just laughed, then ran, disappearing into the trees. Owen chased him, but his steps faltered when he saw a small blue scarf hanging on a low branch. The scarf was dirty, damp, but he knew it instantly. It belonged to Eliza. Owen grabbed it, his hands trembling. Tears welled in his eyes. Eliza is alive. But in the distance, the laughter returned, long and hoarse as if mocking him. Owen gripped the scarf. He knew one thing, this game wasn't over. Meanwhile, back at the town hall, the town was in an uproar. A group of young men, led by a hothead named Jake, had tried to form their own patrol. They came running back, pale-faced. They claimed to have seen Silas standing in the cornfield. His eyes were red, his voice terrifying. Mr. Thompson tried to calm the residents, but the situation devolved into chaos. Some wanted to evacuate, others wanted to fight, but no one truly dared to enter the woods. Owen, holding the blue scarf, knew he had been drawn too deep into this deadly game. House fire, cries erupt. The following days in Red Creek grew heavier. The market remained empty, the fields abandoned. At night, the entire town slept at the town hall. Prayers echoed, as if the whole village was guarding against something unseen. But fear, when held for too long, began to curdle into a misguided bravery. Several young men felt their pride had been wounded. They wouldn't let their town live in terror. Among them was Jake. He stood in the middle of the town hall, shouting, "If we keep waiting for the sheriff, this town will be finished. We're men. We can't just sit here." A few other youths cheered, agreeing. They grabbed hunting rifles, machetes, and even torches. Their faces were full of anger, though fear was visible just beneath. The mayor, Mr. Thompson, tried to stop them. "Don't be reckless. This isn't an ordinary enemy. The police are investigating. Leave it to them." But Jake shot back, "Wait, how long? Our kids can't go outside. The fields are dead. If he's a man, we can fight him." The situation grew heated. Sheriff Parsons finally intervened. "I understand your anger. But going into those woods unprepared is suicide. Trust us, we are developing a strategy." But his words weren't enough. That night, Jake and his group stormed into the woods, torches held high. They shouted, calling Silas's name, daring him to come out. Their voices echoed through the trees, shattering the night's silence. Not long after, screams were heard. The torches fell. A few of the young men ran back to the village, pale and gasping. "He's there. He's there," one of them sobbed. His eyes glowing. "He was right in front of us." The town erupted. People were crying, some hysterically. "Lock the town hall. Lock it now." Owen ran from the substation. He tried to calm them. "Everyone, stay calm. Go back to your homes or stay in the hall. Don't be provoked." But it was hard to calm hundreds of people overcome by panic. Sheriff Parsons ordered his deputies to guard the perimeter. "If we let this get out of hand, we'll have a riot," he said, his face tense. That night, Red Creek was a ghost town besieged by fear. Owen sat on the steps of the town hall, staring into the dark woods, angry. He gripped the blue scarf tightly. "If you're still alive, Eliza, I will find you." And in the dark woods, the thin figure in the ragged raincoat stood still. His eyes glowed red. He smiled, enjoying the panic he had caused. Blood symbol in the field, secret notebook appears. The morning after that chaotic night, Red Creek felt grim. The fog still hung low. People walked with weary faces. Some were packing bags, preparing to leave for a neighboring town. At the diner, the talk was desperate. "If the police can't catch Silas, we have to leave this town," one man said. "No point staying." Another shook his head. "If we all leave, who guards our homes? We can't just give up." At the substation, the mood was also tense. Sheriff Parsons slammed his hand on the table. "Enough. We are facing a cunning enemy, not a ghost. Remember your oath. If we back down now, who protects these people?" Owen, who had been sitting at his desk, finally spoke. "He won't stop until he feels he's won. We have to draw him out." All eyes turned to him. "I'll be the bait. He's challenging me. Let me be the one to draw him out." Sheriff Parsons hesitated, but Owen's gaze was unbreakable. "All right. But we'll have backup watching. Don't be reckless." That night, the police set up surveillance points. Owen walked alone toward the edge of the woods, near where the strange tracks had been found. The air was cold. He stood under a large oak tree, his heart pounding. Suddenly, he heard soft footsteps behind him. He spun around, flashlight beaming. Nothing. "Silas," he yelled. "If you want me, come and get me." Silence. Then, seconds later, that hoarse laugh, closer this time. Owen held his breath. From behind the trees, the tall, thin figure emerged. His raincoat was ragged, his face hidden by a hood, but his red eyes glowed in the dark. Owen raised his gun. His radio crackled. It was Parsons. "Don't shoot yet. Let him get closer. We'll trap him." Silas stopped a few yards from Owen. He just stared. Then, suddenly, he raised his hand, showing something that glinted in the flashlight beam. Owen's heart stopped. It was a silver locket. The locket he had given Eliza. "Oh, God," Owen whispered, his voice shaking. Silas threw the locket onto the ground at Owen's feet. Then he darted back into the darkness. His laughter echoed. "Chase him," Parsons yelled over the radio. Owen ran, followed by the other deputies. But, as always, the figure vanished. Only faint tracks remained. Owen felt his knees, breathless. His hand closed around the locket. Tears welled. "Eliza, are you still alive?" The locket wasn't just proof. It was an invitation to step further into the darkness. Banjo music, hooded group revealed. The days after Silas's appearance in front of Owen sent Red Creek spiraling. The nights felt longer. Every snap of a twig, every bark of a dog, was seen as a bad omen. At Sarah Jenkins's house, a mysterious knock came 3 times. When she worked up the courage to open the door, no one was there. Only a dead black chicken hanging from her fence, a dark cloth tied around its legs. She screamed. The news spread. Silas wasn't just a man. He was a demon, come to curse the town. At the town hall, residents demanded action. "We've lost our farms, our homes," one man yelled at Sheriff Parsons. "If you can't catch him, let us handle it." Parsons tried to calm them. "The police are not idle. We have a plan. Trust me, Silas will be caught." That night, Owen sat on the steps of the substation, the silver locket in his pocket. His young partner, Deputy Rendy, brought him coffee. "Don't be so hard on yourself, man. We all want to find Eliza." Owen smiled bitterly. "You don't understand, Rendy. Every night, I hear her voice calling from those woods. I don't know if it's real or just Silas playing games." A few nights later, the terror escalated. A goat pen was found smashed. The animals were gone. On the ground were strange, large footprints. Then, the power in half the town suddenly died. Darkness. And in the dark, the hoarse laughter echoed from all directions. Children screamed. People prayed aloud. Owen was convinced this was all a distraction. One night, while everyone was on high alert, Owen heard a faint sound from the woods. A woman's voice, whispering his name. Owen. He moved without hesitation, pushing through the brush. At the edge of a small creek, the voice stopped. His eyes caught something snagged on a root, a white handkerchief with small embroidered flowers. He recognized it. It was Eliza's. He ran back. "She's alive." "I know she is." Parsons looked at the handkerchief. "If that's true, this is more complicated than we thought. Silas might not be alone." The words chilled Owen. If there was a mastermind, who was cruel enough to partner with Silas? That night, Owen sat alone, holding the handkerchief. He knew this game wasn't over. And in the woods, 2 shadows stood side by side. The tall, thin figure in the raincoat and a small, hooded figure. A cold voice whispered, "He's getting suspicious." Silas just laughed. "Let him. The closer he gets, the harder he falls." The real mastermind, Surya, the former mayor. The following morning, in the cornfield east of town, a farmer screamed. Dozens of corn stalks had been ripped up and arranged into a strange symbol, a large knife pointing toward the town, stained with fresh blood. "It's a death sign," an old woman cried. Owen and Parsons investigated. "This blood is warm," Parsons noted. "He's sending a message." While everyone was distracted by the symbol, Owen felt pulled back to the dilapidated cabin. He and Rendy went to check it. The cabin was even more menacing. The door was chained, and carved into the wall was the same knife symbol, freshly drawn in blood. "Sir, this is no coincidence," Rendy said, unnerved. As Owen was about to leave, he noticed a pile of straw. Shoving it aside, he found a small, partially burned notebook. He opened it. Much was destroyed, but one sentence remained. "If he finds out the secret, it will all end. Don't let him leave." "Who is he?" Owen muttered. "And what secret?" That night, the town gathered again, terrified by the blood symbol and the news of the book. And then it started. The faint, unmistakable sound of an old banjo tune, plucked slowly, echoed from the deep woods. The residents panicked. "It's the death music." Owen gripped his weapon. "No. It's a sign. They want us to come." Sheriff Parsons looked at Owen. "We're close. And that's when it's most dangerous." Climactic battle, Eliza rescued. That night, the sound of the banjo from the woods sent Red Creek into a frenzy. The slow, plinking notes were clear, as if played from the darkness itself. Sheriff Parsons gathered a small team. "We can't just sit here. We find the source of that music. Tonight." Owen nodded. "I'm coming." They moved into the woods, flashlights cutting the dark. The closer they got, the clearer the music became, as if a strange party was happening in the woods. They reached a small clearing and froze. There sat an old banjo on a tree stump. No one was playing it, but the strings were visibly vibrating, the music echoing around them. A deputy stepped back. "Sir, this ain't right." Owen held his breath, scanning the trees. From the shadows, Silas emerged. His raincoat was ragged, his red eyes glowing. "You were brave to come so far," he rasped. "Good. I've been waiting." The police raised their weapons. "Don't move," Parsons yelled. Silas just laughed, a long, tearing sound. "You think you can catch me with guns? You've already walked into the trap." At that exact moment, screams erupted from the direction of the town. Flames lit up the sky. Parsons realized it instantly. "It's a diversion. He wanted us away from the town." Owen turned, his face pale. "Eliza," he whispered, and then he ran, faster than he ever had, back toward Red Creek. The town hall was in chaos. Several houses at the edge of the village were on fire. People were screaming, trying to put out the flames with buckets, or just crying helplessly. Owen and the deputies helped evacuate children. His hands were singed, but he didn't care. The fires were put out by dawn, but 2 homes were destroyed, and one elderly resident, trapped inside, had died. The town was submerged in grief. "This is Silas," a man screamed. "He wants us all dead." Owen sat on the steps of the town hall, gripping Eliza's handkerchief. His heart was full of guilt. "If I had been faster." Rendy clapped his shoulder. "Don't blame yourself, man. Silas is cruel. He's playing us." Owen looked up, his eyes sharp. "That's just it. I have to find him. Eliza is the key to all of this." Sheriff Parsons joined them, his face grim. Tonight's fire wasn't just terror. He's trying to destroy this town, piece by piece. Owen clenched his fist. "No. This isn't just Silas. There's someone else behind this. I heard that other voice." Cold, calculating. Parsons stared at him. "If there's a mastermind, we're dealing with something far bigger than we ever imagined." Here is the continuation of the story, written in English. The real mastermind, Josiah Blackwood. Owen gripped the handkerchief tighter. "No," he repeated. "This isn't just Silas." Annie said she heard another voice. A cold, educated voice. The voice of someone giving orders. Sheriff Parsons nodded, his face hardening under the office's fluorescent lights. If there's a mastermind, he's using Silas. He's weaponized a local bogeyman to cover his crimes. Owen stood up, his eyes fixed on the map of Boone County on the wall. Silas is the puppet. So who is the puppeteer? He thought about the people in Red Creek with power. Mayor Thompson? He was too weak and scared. Pastor Evans? Possible, but unlikely. Then he remembered the words of Jed Miller, of Annie, of the townspeople. They all spoke of old traditions, the spirits of the mountain. Parsons, Owen said, who hates this town the most? Who feels betrayed by this town? Parsons frowned, and then his eyes widened. My God. There's only one person. Josiah Blackwood. The name hung in the air. Josiah Blackwood was the former mayor from the wealthy family that had founded the town generations ago. His family had lost nearly everything when the coal industry collapsed. Blackwood had been defeated in the last election by the more progressive-minded Thompson. Since then, he had lived as a recluse in his crumbling family mansion on the far side of Shadow Mountain. Last night's fire, Owen said, the realization hitting him like a physical blow. It wasn't random terror. It targeted the homes on the edge of town. The homes on the land Blackwood tried to buy. To reopen the old mine. They had their motive, greed and revenge. Blackwood wanted to drive everyone out to reclaim his ancestral land, and he had weaponized the valley's greatest fear, the legend of Shadow Mountain, to do it. Silas isn't a ghost, Parsons said, grabbing his shotgun. He's Blackwood's enforcer. And Eliza. My God, Owen. Eliza vanished 2 years ago. The same time Blackwood lost the election and started his plan. Owen said nothing. He just checked the magazine of his pistol. He knew Eliza was alive. Blackwood was holding her as leverage, and perhaps Eliza had stumbled onto something 2 years ago. Climactic battle, Eliza rescued. They couldn't take a patrol car. They went on foot, taking a trail through the old, defunct mine tunnels, a shortcut only locals like Owen knew. The night was thick, and the only sound was their boots crunching on gravel. As they approached the Blackwood estate, an old, rotting Gothic revival mansion on the hillside, they heard it again. The banjo. This time, it wasn't ghostly, it was frantic, angry, playing a fast, mad tune. They found the source in an old barn behind the main house. A dim light glowed from within. Owen and Parsons pressed themselves against the wooden slats, peering through a crack. Inside, the scene was a nightmare. Silas Croft, just a man, gaunt and filthy in his ragged raincoat, his eyes wild, sat on a stool, manically strumming the banjo. He wasn't a spirit, he was a fanatic. And in the center of the room, Josiah Blackwood stood, dressed in an expensive suit, a stark contrast to the chaos. He was speaking to a figure tied to a chair. It was Eliza. She was alive. Her hair was long and matted, her face gaunt, but her eyes were full of fire. They're coming, aren't they? Blackwood said to her, his voice the cold, educated one Annie had described. Your little Owen. I've watched him run around like a panicked chicken. This town took everything from me. I am simply taking it back, starting with those fools at the market and ending by leveling it all. You're a monster, Eliza spat. I am a preservationist, Blackwood corrected. And Silas, here. He believes in the traditions. He believes in the sacrifice the mountain demands. That's when Parsons kicked the door in. Boone County Sheriffs. Hands up, Josiah. Silas screamed, not a human sound, but a feral roar. He grabbed a pickaxe from the wall and charged the officers. Parsons and Silas went down in a tangle. Blackwood pulled an old revolver from his coat and aimed it at Owen. The little hero. The game is over, Blackwood. Owen shouted, his own pistol trained on the former mayor's chest. The game has just begun. Blackwood laughed, and instead of shooting Owen, he swung the gun toward Eliza. A gunshot echoed. But it wasn't from Blackwood's revolver. Owen had fired first. The bullet tore through Blackwood's shoulder, sending him to the ground. The revolver clattered away. At the same time, Parsons, in the struggle, managed to slam Silas against the wall. The thin man crumpled, finally subdued. Owen rushed to Eliza, cutting the ropes with his knife. She fell into his arms, shaking but not broken. "I knew you'd come," she whispered, her voice raw. "I would never stop," Owen replied, holding her tight. Town recalmed, message of hope delivered. Dawn broke over Red Creek. The fog lifted, not with menace, but like a cleansing. The news spread fast. The monster of Shadow Mountain was just a man named Silas, manipulated by a bitter, disgraced politician named Blackwood. Their crimes weren't supernatural, they were painfully human: greed, murder, and revenge. The human flesh at the market? It was a gruesome ploy. Blackwood had ordered Silas to murder 2 hikers, who were reported missing from another state, to start the mass hysteria. Jed Miller was just a pawn, too scared and too in debt to refuse selling the special game meat without asking questions. As Owen and Parsons led the wounded Blackwood and the cuffed Silas from the mansion, some of the townsfolk had gathered. The fear on their faces slowly turned to anger, and then, finally, to relief. Sarah Jenkins stood there, holding her husband's hand. She looked at Owen, who had his jacket draped over Eliza's shoulders. She gave him a small nod of silent understanding. The town of Red Creek was scarred, but it was not broken. They had seen the darkness that hid not just in the woods, but in the hearts of their neighbors. But they had also seen courage. Owen stood with Eliza, looking out at Shadow Mountain. It didn't look menacing now, it was just a mountain.